one of the most powerful men on earth, holds a position that has existed for nearly 2,000 years. As the world changes and faith evolves, his authority remains. What began with one apostle has become 1.2 billion followers under one man. He is the head of the Catholic Church, the Pope. And this is his path to power. In this episode, never-before-seen orders sent from Rome to the New World expose the most scandalous popes in Vatican history and reveal how spectacular advancements in art, science, and exploration are embroiled in webs of sex, bribery, and murderous rivalries. From the time of St. Peter through the Middle Ages, popes act as beacons of faith, morality, and religious leadership. But as church influence expands, the trappings of power will seduce even the godliest of men. In 1417, the papacy has been split between France and Italy for 40 years. But after the devastation of the plague, Pope Martin V reunites the Church and begins to rebuild the once great institution in the once thriving city of Rome.
It was with the return of the papacy to Rome that its heart began to beat again, and it started to grow and to function as the center of the Western Church. And that was when the Renaissance really kicked in.
Very gradually, as Europe climbs back into economic activity, you start to see a class emerge with enough money to have aspirations to buy things. Luxury comes back on the scene.
As a merchant class begins to rise, Europe ushers in an era of revolutionary advancements in art and science. Explorers set out in search of new lands. The first mechanical clock and the Gutenberg printing press are invented.
And on the walls of the churches, you start to see for the first time that when human beings appear, they're not just tiny. Man is standing a little closer next to God.
And the man closest to God is the Pope.
We owe some of the most significant art in Western history to the popes of the Renaissance.
The world of Michelangelo, Leonardo, Raphael, and a whole succession of popes act as patrons to this huge flowering of the Western imagination.
The Renaissance popes reshaped the city of Rome into what we know it today.
Today, upwards of 10 million tourists a year visit Rome to see the art and architecture commissioned by Renaissance popes. The Sistine Chapel, Capitoline Museums, and the cloister of Santa Maria della Pace, all built in the name of the Church during this time in European history. But the celebrated advancements in art and exploration come at a hefty price.
For all of the beauty and creativity that we think of now as the Renaissance, a lot of that work was financed by corruption. You want the Sistine Chapel? The Sistine Chapel was paid for by bribery. a lot of that beauty, the flip side of it was brutality.
The church is very human, made up of sinful people who are striving to live a life according to the Spirit, and yet we fall. And big men with big titles fall.
We always have to remember that this history of the papacy is not always a good history.
Behind the iconic images of the 15th and 16th centuries lie webs of scandal, violence, and depravity surrounding the popes of that time.
The thing you have to really remember about this moment in history is there is no other game in town but Catholicism. The higher up you get in this organization, which is a kind of multinational by this time, the more important your influence is. And the Pope is the CEO of this global institution.
And Italy at this time was an unbelievably dangerous place to be an important person.
Throughout the Renaissance, the church amasses an exorbitant amount of wealth through property holdings. Churches act as local banks. They hand out loans, collect tithes, and sit on vast reserves of gold and silver reaped through political alliances. With the church's swelling wealth comes immense power, and Europeans stop at nothing to gain favor with the church and garner influence within it.
If you read Shakespeare and you read Jacobean drama and stuff like that, Italy at the time becomes this shorthand for evil and grotesque double-dealing and poisoning.
Italy at this time is, of course, not a country. She's a set of little city-states. And the basic tool of loyalty in all of these places is family. Family. You know, the mafia doesn't grow out of Italy for no reason at all.
The families that control these city-states are in constant competition with one another for money, land, and most importantly, power.
The most important city-states were Milan, run by the Sforza family, Florence, which came under the domination of the Medici family, and there was Rome, which was the kingdom in which the king was the Pope.
Today, we don't often think of popes as family men, but in the 1400s, it was extremely common for popes to have children.
It's pre the Victorian moment and the Puritan moment. So all of these people who are running this big institution, many of whom have come from top-notch families, cannot get married, and they understand that. But that doesn't appear to mean chaste, because the Pope will have children.
By stacking the College of Cardinals with sons and nephews, popes are able to ensure that their families stay in power.
There is a great problem when the papacy changes between families. Rome can become a very dangerous, even violent place there, where the faction that's controlled the Vatican finds itself under threat.
I think the Pazzi conspiracy is a beautiful microcosm of how crazy a place Renaissance Italy was.
By the 1470s, the Italian families had been embroiled in power struggles for generations. And the newly appointed Pope Sixtus IV, a member of the ambitious Della Rovere family, feels an imminent threat from one of his rivals.
There's conflict with the Medicis.
The Medici family, they were kind of a messy family. I think about them as being the dynasty of the Renaissance.
The Medicis had interfered with some business dealings of the Della Roveres.
One of Pope Sixtus's many nephews is a vicious nutcase. Says the answer to our problems is get rid of the Medici, get rid of this headache.
This was just a stupid idea. I mean, the Medici clan was huge.
The Pope agreed to the murder of Lorenzo de' Medici and his brother.
The Della Roveres recruit members of the Pazzi family, another Italian banking empire.
The second wealthiest family and Florence was the Pazzi, who resented the Medici because they felt that the Medici had unfair advantages.
On Sunday, April 26, 1478, the assailants attacked the Medici brothers at a mass in Florence.
The conspirators attacked and killed the brother and attacked Lorenzo, who escaped.
Lorenzo musters his troops. They quickly capture the main conspirators and the murderers, and they're summarily executed.
And on August 6, 1492, just 3 days after Columbus set sail for the New World, with the wealthiest Italian families entangled in murderous rivalries, and the power to rule all of Europe and the Americas at stake, 23 cardinals embark upon one of the most ruthless conclaves in Vatican history. In August of 1492, 23 cardinals must elect a new pope who will lead more Catholics than the world has ever known.
The cardinals will live in the Sistine Chapel until they finally decide who's pope. So it's a very intense hothouse.
Every powerful Italian family has a seat at the table and a horse in the race.
The two most powerful factions at this conclave, one was led by a cardinal named Ascanio Sforza. Sforza's primary rival was Giuliano della Rovere.
And Giuliano della Rovere, the nephew of Sixtus IV, the vicious pope who called for the violent removal of his rival, has inherited his uncle's blind ambition.
Della Rovere had a very powerful personality.
He's very smart and he's very ruthless.
Determined to swing the conclave in his favor, Giuliano della Rovere begins handing out bribes in exchange for votes.
Although the matter may finally be about God and heaven, this is an earthly institution and it's run by men and it has a power structure attached to it. And whenever in history you introduce power structures, you will find forms of corruption.
But while della Rovere and Sforza wheel and deal center stage, another candidate begins to form his own campaign behind the scenes.
Rodrigo Borgia was both an insider and a dark horse at the same time.
Rodrigo Borgia is a Spanish cardinal who had steadily risen through the ranks of the church since he was a teenager.
He had been through 5 papacies, the most important, powerful member of the Vatican bureaucracy. But he was a Spaniard. That makes him an outsider.
But despite being an outsider, Borgia is an experienced Vatican politician. On day 4 of the conclave, the Spanish cardinal makes his move.
In the middle of the night, 6 mules loaded with silver leave the Borgia Palace in Rome and trot along the streets to the palace of Ascanio Sforza, cardinal and one of his rivals. And it is absolutely clear that somewhere underneath that, a deal has been done. Rodrigo Borgia bought his way into the papacy.
Borgia's first order of business as Pope Alexander VI is to surround himself with a network of people he trusts. Like many powerful men of the era and today, Borgia places his children in the highest ranks of his council.
He had some of his children marry important princes in other dominions. He made his one son a cardinal and gave him all kinds of church income.
It is a story of nepotism, really. People thought, how could these kind of venal arrivists take over the Vatican City.
Flanked by his children, Pope Alexander VI prepares to build a Borgia dynasty.
The hierarchy of the church is about making sure that the papacy stays powerful. And we have a global multinational company operating. It needs a vast administration.
Pope Alexander VI is the father, almost the creator, of modern diplomacy. He introduced the practice of stationing the prototypical ambassadors at the city-states to live there. And then he started doing that with the major North European capitals.
Each of his ambassadors live amongst the clergy in their various stations and report back to the Vatican. Just weeks into his papacy, Alexander VI has consolidated his power across Europe, and he does not intend to stop there.
The New World is discovered, and Columbus is instructed to write letters to the Pope, sort of chatty little travelogues about all the things that he's seeing and who the natives are and what they look like and how fascinating they are. He's filling in the Pope in order to soften up the Pope towards the Spanish perspective. And because the Portuguese and the Spanish are spatting about who is going to own what.
This got very ugly and very tense, and it seemed likely to result in war.
They turned to the papacy, to Alexander VI, to adjudicate the international boundary.
It's the Pope who literally draws the line on the map of the ocean.
Everything east of that line belonged to Portugal. And that's how Brazil came to be a Portuguese colony.
On May 12, 1493, Pope Alexander VI issues the Inter Cetera. The First Papal Order grants the majority of the New World to his homeland.
The Spanish have the lion's share, and blow me down, but if the Pope doesn't also get a Spanish bride for his second son.
The Papal Order, which leads to hundreds of years of pillaging and destruction of native lands, is still controversial today. The world will soon learn that all of Borgia's accomplishments come with a price. When Rodrigo Borgia becomes Pope Alexander VI in 1492, he ushers in an era of extreme duality. He brings astonishing advancements in art and technology into the Vatican, alongside a culture of corruption, nepotism, and brutal politicking.
He knew how to terrify people. He knew how to bully people. But he was a very astute politician.
He was like a mafia don, like Marlon Brando in The Godfather. Somebody who enjoyed the trappings of power. Often a very good administrator is somebody who wants to get very rich themselves.
Corruption is twofold. It's financial and sexual.
One of the most salacious stories to come out of the Borgia papacy is the banquet of the chestnuts.
The story is that it was a party at which dozens of prostitutes were invited and everybody got naked and all sorts of things happened, somehow involving chestnuts. And supposedly Pope Alexander was present.
Though the tale of the banquet is met with doubt, the story of the Pope's mistress who took up residency in the Vatican is undisputed.
Giulia Farnese was a beautiful young member of an important Italian family. And when Rodrigo became Pope, among the young men he appointed cardinals, one was Giulia's brother. This was a way of buying the girl I'll make you a cardinal. You let me have her as a mistress. Rodrigo was 60 at the time. She was 15. She lived in the papal palace with the other young Borgias. He had at least one child with her.
To us, that looks like a bundle of contradictions. How can you be conventionally pious and yet be living this kind of contradiction? It's a kind of Latin distinction between the man and the office. People manage to respect the office while being aware that the people who occupy it were extremely fallible.
The modern mind has some trouble with this. Jesus himself was both God and man. The person is both body and soul. The church is both justice, the law, and mercy, forgiveness of sin.
There was a sense in which sin was automatic. Human beings would sin, and if they didn't sin, they wouldn't need the church to help them get out of it.
And one way the Vatican funds the Pope's sins is with the sale of indulgences. Fees paid to the church in exchange for salvation.
If you know you're going to sin, maybe you could buy ahead of time a pardon.
Despite their moral questionability, indulgences pay for many of the treasures we've come to associate with the modern church.
Borgia exemplifies all the things about the Renaissance papacy that we both deplore and admire. A corrupt papacy, but he's great patron of the arts. He begins to employ the greatest artists and architects of the time.
During Borgia's papal rule, the Castle St. Angelo is restored. A center for the University of Rome is built, and Michelangelo draws plans to rebuild St. Peter's Basilica.
One just has to live with the paradox that these things are the product of sin, but they are not themselves sinful. They're wonderful, and the world is better for them.
Borgia commissions so many works of art in the name of God and his family that the image modern Christianity has come to associate with Jesus Christ is said to be modeled after his oldest son, Cesare. But while Alexander VI continues to collect bribes and adorn the Vatican, an old rival hatches a plan to take him down.
The man who will turn out to be Rodrigo Borgia's real nemesis is Giuliano della Rovere.
He was an angry, aggressive man in contrast to Alexander VI's nature, which by everybody's agreement was immensely charming.
Borgia and della Rovere's rivalry dates back to when they were both young cardinals. But when Borgia wins the papacy in 1492, della Rovere becomes obsessed with destroying his enemy.
Not surprisingly, when della Rovere doesn't get the papal throne, he basically leaves Rome in a sulk.
Della Rovere exiled himself to France and attached himself to the French court and tried to work against Pope Alexander VI.
Determined to take out his rival, della Rovere convinces King Charles VIII of France to capture Naples, and on his way to sack Rome and dethrone the Pope.
2 years after Rodrigo Borgia comes to the throne, this army floods over the Alps into northern Italy and towards Rome. It's a major catastrophe.
As the immense French army on its way to Naples approached Rome, the papal court got ready to flee. Alexander decided at the 11th hour, I'm not going to run away.
Despite having no army himself, in the face of 25,000 French soldiers, Pope Alexander VI is determined to fight for Rome and the Church.
Basically, then, the Pope is having to negotiate sort of for his life and for the life of Vatican and papal independence.
He invited Charles to come live with him in the Vatican. And he so charmed him, so won him over, that Charles announced, hey, this is the real thing. I'm not going to depose him.
And then Pope Alexander helps to scoot them out on their way.
In one of the greatest diplomatic moves in world history, the Borgia Pope convinces King Charles of France to leave Rome and the papacy intact.
Della Rovere went nuts over this because Della Rovere lost his chance to displace his enemy.
But soon, Giuliano della Rovere will prove to be just the first of many threats to the world-changing papacy of Alexander VI. In 1494, the papacy is both flourishing and festering in a sea of corruption. And although the Borgia Pope charms King Charles into sparing Rome, his formidable French fleet continues its march through the rest of the Italian peninsula.
The situation in Italy is getting very dodgy, and into this vacuum kind of enters this passionate fundamentalist called Girolamo Savonarola.
Girolamo Savonarola is a charismatic Italian friar living in Florence. As Vatican culture becomes overtaken with materialism and depravity, Savonarola becomes more and more committed to the word of the gospel and takes vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience.
He's a very good preacher, and he understands the Bible inside out. He's part of a church, but he sees its corruption. And so he starts to make an attack on the Vatican.
If you take Borgia and Savonarola, they represent polar opposites within the Christianity of the 15th century.
While the Borgia Pope commissions lavish works of art in the name of God, Savonarola hails these expenditures as the downfall of Christianity.
His take on the Renaissance is basically, this is the beginning of hell on earth. This is the beginning of the end.
Savonarola's apocalyptic sermons draw thousands. He blames the Pope for the French invasions and proclaims that God is punishing Italians for the hedonism displayed by the Church.
When Italy was being invaded by French armies for the first time in decades, it was a moment when the world looked as if it was coming to an end. And Savonarola started preaching this world end message before the crisis really hit. So people thought, well, here's a prophet.
He understands what happens when people get frightened. And what he does is to say, look at all this art all around the walls. There was a time when all you saw was pictures of our saints and Mary and Jesus. And now, along with them, you've got these people of flesh and blood, and there's quite a lot of flesh being shown too. This is the body. This is not the spirit. We're moving away from the true path, and God is punishing us.
While Pope Alexander VI dismisses the fanatical preacher as a passing phase, Savonarola's following only grows.
He did whip up a lot of support in Florence, aimed at Rome, and he wrote some shocking things about Alexander. He wanted the world to see Alexander as the embodiment of evil. He wanted Alexander to be removed from the papacy. Alexander could have had Savonarola taken into custody, killed. He just laughed it off and never defended himself against it.
But on February the 7th, 1497, Savonarola makes a spectacular display of his rebellion that the Pope cannot ignore.
Savonarola contrives this idea of a bonfire to set fire to things that are not necessary and fripperies and are luxuries.
Famously, Savonarola gathered paintings, beautiful objects, luxurious fabrics, all put on a bonfire as a symbol of the last days.
It becomes known in history as the bonfire of the vanities.
Tens of thousands of Florentines flock to the bonfire of the vanities and burn their worldly possessions.
It's a brilliant stroke. It's intimidating, it's public spectacle, it shows his power, and it's dramatic. It is one of the moments in this moment in history that lives on as emblematic of excess luxury and then excess fundamentalism.
Pope Alexander VI realizes Savonarola is no longer someone to be ignored. He deems the fire a declaration of war against the Vatican. In 1497, after months of ignoring Savonarola's incendiary displays against the Vatican, the bonfire of the vanities forces Pope Alexander VI to strike back.
The Pope told him to stop all this. He said no, and the Pope declared him a heretic.
2 months after the spectacle in Florence, Pope Alexander VI has Savonarola excommunicated.
The excommunication is a very powerful tool, which makes a lot of people nervous about coming to hear Savonarola talk. They may believe in him, but the Pope still runs the show, and this guy is going to hell if he's been excommunicated.
He was destroyed by his defiance of the Pope.
For his transgressions, the Pope's supporters demand the heretic die. On May 23rd, 1498, Girolamo Savonarola is pulled into Florence's central square and burned at the stake.
They let him burn until nothing is left.
In August of 1503, after creating a diplomatic empire, commissioning some of the greatest works of art the world has ever known, and reigning over one of the most depraved papacies in Vatican history, the Borgia Pope contracts malaria and suddenly dies.
It's such a dramatic decline. A mosquito bites someone, and the entire 11 years of trying to build a dynasty collapses. It's gone. And within a year, the arch-enemy has taken the papacy.
Just 3 months after his death, Rodrigo Borgia's arch-rival, Giuliano della Rovere, becomes Pope Julius II.
Della Rovere was not chosen by a college of cardinals that saw in him a holy man suited to be the leader of the universal church. He took the office which he had hungered for by the force of his ability to intimidate, and almost immediately became a kind of egomaniac.
Pope Julius II, still driven by spite and vengeance, makes it his personal mission to destroy everything his nemesis built, starting with Borgia's son, Cesare.
Pope Alexander definitely did go overboard with nepotism, particularly with respect to this son, Cesare.
Cesare was basically being given the keys of the kingdom. He was given control of the army.
After he becomes Pope, Julius II has Cesare Borgia thrown in prison, stripped of his title, and eventually killed.
Della Rovere devoted himself to blackening the reputation of the whole Borgia family.
The rumor starts that Lucretia Borgia, Rodrigo's daughter, is a whore who is sleeping with her father and probably sleeping with her brother. There is no evidence inside the Borgia history of incest. That doesn't mean it did not happen, but it's a bit like tabloid journalism. Once the mud has been slung, it sticks.
Pope Julius II continues to slander the Borgia name and proclaims their behavior so disgusting that the part of the Vatican they lived in must be closed off.
Julius II had those Borgia apartments sealed up, so contaminated by these evil presences that nobody should go there. They stayed sealed till the 19th century, and now they're a tourist attraction.
Today, over 5 million people tour the restored Borgia apartments every year, making them one of the most visited attractions in Vatican City. And despite Pope Julius II's avid condemnation of the corrupt Borgia papacy, his lifestyle is even more extravagant.
He actually was the great patron of Michelangelo. He rebuilt the whole of St. Peter's. He commissioned Michelangelo to do the dome.
In 1508, Pope Julius II commissions the most famous work in the modern Vatican, the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel.
Della Rovere was driven by personal ambition, grandiosity. He wanted Michelangelo to get finished with the Sistine Chapel so he could get to work on Julius's tomb, which was never finished.
Despite his motivations, art flourishes under the Della Rovere Pope, and the papacy becomes stronger and more powerful than ever.
He's a warrior pope who actually goes into battle leading his own soldiers, wearing silver armor. It is to aggrandize himself to some extent, but it's also part of a vision of a papacy that has to be underpinned by power.
Pope Julius II continues flaunting the power of the papacy until his death in 1513. By then, another powerful Italian family has been patiently plotting to take over the papal throne, and the young banking heir will take Renaissance opulence to levels of excess from which the Church may never recover. The Renaissance popes are known for their extravagance. But one pope pushes papal spending beyond the realm of wild excess. Pope Leo X is a member of the wealthy Medici family and has grown up in a lifestyle of lavish luxury.
Giovanni de' Medici was the second son of Lorenzo de' Medici. He was a pleasure-loving man, loved the arts, theater, music, all that sort of thing.
Leo X and members of the Medici dynasty represent the most glorious aspect of the papacy at the beginning of the 16th century and also its nemesis. They are the initiators of the alliance between the papacy and the arts and the corruption of Western Christianity altogether.
Leo X celebrates his election with a party in Florence. Part of the celebration includes a young boy painted in gold. In the middle of the festivities, the boy dies from paint poisoning. Many see this death of the golden boy as a symbol of the apocalyptic prophecy preached by Savonarola, the embodiment of death by excess at the hands of the Catholic Church.
Pope Francis is rapidly becoming known as the People's Pope.
Yeah, he takes the bus, as we've reported here. He pays his own bills.
Pope Francis is simply not interested in the power, wealth, influence aspect of the papacy at all. He gets up at 5 and he works till 10 p.m. So there's a kind of focus there that we admire, but if everybody was like that, the world would be horrible. The Renaissance popes did things very, very differently. They took a lot of holidays, they partied. And they created beauty. but the beauty was paid for with sin.
The Borgias, the Della Roveres, the Medicis, and the murderous, power-hungry families that shape Renaissance Italy bring the church to a breaking point. By the end of the 16th century, their blind ambition, fierce loyalty, and frivolous spending has bankrupted the church financially and spiritually.
What they did with power, it's obviously incompatible with the figure of Jesus in the Gospels. And yet, when you stand in front of Michelangelo's Pietà in the Vatican, or Raphael's frescoes, what do you say? Do you take a hammer to them? Or do you say they have nothing to do with Christianity?
The finance and the corruption and the creativity are in a queasy relationship to each other all the way through this extraordinary moment in history.
There can be no way to untangle the corruption of the Renaissance with the beauty and discovery that has come out of it. Much of the power of today's Vatican lies in the diplomatic positions set up by the Borgia Pope and the tourism attracted by the works of art commissioned by the Della Roveres and the Medicis.
What has been erected are these extraordinary gifts to all of humanity so that the church is like a repository of beauty. How can we have this magnificent art repository and architecture of St. Peter's and then the corrupt actions of individuals? And yet the church is both.
The duality of the Renaissance lies within every facet of the modern church. With all progress comes sacrifice. And despite the corruption of fallible men, the papacy remains divine.